guys.
Thank you very much, Trev. I am on stage with Amazing the Jungler of Origen. I won't mince words. You guys were losing that game up until the river fight and then into the Baron. How do you keep your composure in a game like that?
You don't really keep your composure at all. You just go with the flow and hope that they make more mistakes than you do at some point. That's basically how it is.
Well, clearly that was what happened this game, and you guys did manage to take it after a really, really long, drawn-out, crazy one. I want to talk a little bit about going forward into playoffs and looking back at the games you guys have played. Definitely been a rough road. What, if anything, do you take from a game like this going forward?
That every game is winnable, I suppose. That's the only thing you can take away from these kind of games. Regular season games in general, especially if they become like this, are just like scrims. So it's not something you can individually take away from, but in the grand scheme of things, it's a tough road that we had in terms of losing and not performing to our utter best or to the potential that we may have is definitely something that prepares us for playoffs, because if we know that there can be lows, we also know there can be highs, and we've been through the lows now by now, so I suppose the playoffs is going to be a bit less rocky in terms of the road.
Well, certainly to be hoped, so I'm looking forward to seeing how you guys do perform in the playoffs. Last question for you, though, is I know he's on temporary, but how is it like to have Peke back in the roster?
It's pretty fun. It's pretty fun. The way that he just approaches the game is just really different to a lot of players. He doesn't really care that much about individual mechanics, but he really has like this game sense. You know, that's something you cannot really teach. And Peke, more so than any other player that I've known, has this game sense coming in, and he can stop practicing for 3 months and suddenly just practice with the team for a couple of scrims, and he's still going to be good.
Well, certainly showed in the results 2-all in the week. Congratulations, and you can go ahead and join your team. But we're going to send it back over to the analyst desk to break down that win and close out the week.
Thank you very much, Pyra. It's time to close out the week, and whoo, was that one hell of a game to close things off. Let's jump into that famous game sense of Xpeke. We have a couple of moments that prove it at the end, but in the beginning there was something you wanted to highlight where you do see the OG disconnect, because this was by no means a clean game by this 2-0 squad.
Yeah, the thing I have with this dive is just that this is like the 4th or 5th time from Origen that we've seen where they go for a play where there's just lack of synergy, lack of communication. We had the jump from Amazing in the mid lane too. Right here we'll see it too. Like we're rolling the dive. And Odoamne, you got something to say about like target prio here as well?
I mean, we see the Brawl multi landing, and this dive is really good because it's a 4v2, and then the Brawl multi lands on Sivir, and then they miss the Q, and now they just overextend because they switch targets, they don't land the CCs, Ramos gets his TP in, and then they just are caught in a really bad spot because they used all their cooldowns for a failed dive, so it didn't work out at all. And now they even overextend to go for the tower. I mean, ROCCAT goes for the tower, and the OG thinks they can get a really good TP flank here, but they just don't have the CC to land, and they just pretty much waste their summoners, and they just keep losing tempo from this.
Yeah, in this one, we thought, okay, good for ROCCAT, and sadly more of the same for OG. Yet in some way, ROCCAT didn't end up winning this game. Another replay we want to bring up is the Baron face check, where OG rightfully catches some of the members out, which is a big turning point in this game. I do believe this is this one.
This is like the end of the previous
one.
I mean, this is the end of the previous replay. Yep. Let's roll it, see what happens.
Yeah, come on. You can roll this clip out.
Something's wrong with the
mystery clip.
There we go.
There we go.
Yeah, it's a fail pick off. So they go for Amazing, but they forget that he's Elise and he can survive. And this kind of pick turns into baiting your entire team into like Champions like LeBlanc, and then eventually Origen get the Baron, and that's kind of the turning point of this game.
Yes, it is.
You started seeing the damage that Sivir had there, though. Not that it was enough to win the fight, but Sivir throws one W out, a couple of autos, and bounces through. It's like, maybe if they had a little bit more there, but the positioning was too good for Origen. The problem for Origen right now, you've got to look at it, is both games, they should have lost this week. Both of them. The Unicorns game should have been a win for the Unicorns. ROCCAT should have been able to close that out, you would think, with the inhibitors being down, so it's a little worrying for them.
So I have a question. I think you are right. They should have, obviously, if they could have lost both those games. Isn't this the best case scenario for Origen? Knowing that they are already in playoffs, and now having Xpeke seen the shot calling issues firsthand, not from the sidelines, in the game, and they still get a 2-0? Or is a mental issue that, of course, Power of Evil now maybe is questioning his play. Is that important? Like, what is the end result here?
I mean, teams can request VODs or at least the audio from the LCS stage. So if there's shot calling issues, Expected can request the audio and see, okay, who's shot calling? Nobody. I don't think they even need the audio to see that it was just a complete mess.
Well, they had that the previous weeks, though.
I think having Expected on stage, guarantee you that he made some of these clutch decisions and that Baron backdoor wouldn't have played out the way without him. So I hope actually that, sadly for Power of Evil, yes, he's sick, but that they just keep Expected in playoffs, because I don't think Power of Evil brings anything to the table that Expected can't bring.
I mean, I think they did really well with Expected, because I think they only had like the same as we did with Ryu, only 1 day of scrims with him, and it was good. It seemed they still were kind of lost in the early mid game. They got outplayed by the enemy team, but as soon as it hit to mid and late game, they just seemed more confident in what to do. They managed to get picks off, win team fights. So I don't really know what to say if they should keep Power of Evil or Expected, but so far it just seems a lot better with Expected on the roster.
Somebody else that was kind of lost in this game was Soas. For the longest time, it was 0-2-0. And I want to pick your brain, Odoamne. What do you think about Titanic Hydra?
I mean,
because you can no longer switch them on this patch into the Ravenous.
I mean, yeah, as you said, this patch is the one where they just changed the switching. You can't switch it anymore. So I think Titanic Hydra is good if they have a lot of AP damage. If you play against the caster top, he can't really burst you because you're just tanky, so you don't really need the sustain. But when you play against a tank and you just go and try to siege the tower against him, it's really hard because he's just going to chunk you once, then you're going to be 50% HP and you can't base. So I think it's just a lot better to just sacrifice your early and mid-game tankiness to just get the lifesteal Hydra, be weak for another 5-10 minutes until you start getting Black Cleaver and then just more tanky items or just more damage overall, and then you can be a bigger split push threat, because we saw this game, he had only Titanic Hydra, Black Cleaver, and then he was forced to buy Vamp Scepter.
Yeah, he went Hex Drinker after.
Yeah, he went Hex Drinker and then had Vamp Scepter, so he was trying to split push, but with only 10% lifesteal, it's just really hard, because you can't really trade the tank that much, because you can't lifesteal after. So I think just go Ravenous Hydra, Black Cleaver, and then you just start scaling. You keep on scaling. With Titanic Hydra, if you go Titanic Hydra, Black Cleaver, you hit a spike, and then it takes you like 10 more minutes to get your lifesteal item.
Yeah, the top lane, I love hearing the different interactions, especially with Rammus, a champion that's fairly new. It certainly bought them a little bit of extra time. I want to shift a little bit away from Origen, because obviously we saw ROCCAT in that game as well. I feel like for them, Airwax landed a lot more this game than I've seen him in quite a while. He had a better performance in the mid-game. Early game, maybe not so much, but how do you feel watching that game of Airwax performance and the rest of ROCCAT specifically?
I mean, I think Airwax played really well this game. He got invades off in the bot lane. He killed amazing. Then, yeah, he overextended and died once, but he just invaded so much this game. Most of the time he was in the enemy jungle. He was pressuring amazing a lot, so his mid and bot lane could play a lot better. Yeah, the other ROCCAT members, I think they did fine, but they just couldn't really find a solid plan to close out the game, because they had good leads. They had the Rammus. I don't think they abused Rammus as much as they should. They just kept matching Fiora with it, when I think they should have just looked for more team fights, because Rammus just hits the spike with Sunfire Tournament. They were really ahead in the game. He had Sunfire Tournament at like 15 minutes in game, and then if they just like group up and force team fights, then I don't think Origen can do anything, especially with Fiora that early in the game.
Definitely agree on Airwax playing well. However, I like seeing on these invade champions where you can actually go into the enemy jungle, but Nidalee kind of has to make sure she keeps farming. I think his decision-making could be a little bit better. When you go for a play for a 1v1 on the enemy jungle and you still have 3 camps up in your jungle, I think that's where Airwax should still improve a little bit. But he had some really good predictions with his spears. That's what I like the most. He understood that he was playing against LeBlanc, so he eliminated all the options from Expected in a couple of these fights. But ROCCAT, the problem doesn't seem to lie within the players. It really is a team play, and whenever they get a lead, they fail to snowball and close out the game.
Yep, still seems to be the problem for them. Final question about the game. No Nautilus picked nor banned. I mean, so as always goes back to that Fiora, but what did you make of it? Would you have picked it up?
I mean, I think ever since Sunfire got buffed and Iceborne is just being a really strong item, I think just tanks top are super strong. They just have like a safe, reliable laning phase. For example, I think Nautilus would have been good into Fiora as well. Nautilus would just like bully Fiora for the majority of the game. Even Nautilus would have been good into Rammus as well, just because Nautilus is just the strongest early game tank in the laning phase. So he can just have a lot of pressure. He can push the wave. He can make plays with the jungle. He has really good roams mid. He has really good TP plays. So I think Nautilus should have been most likely picked in this game by either side, but Ramos is good as well. But I think on the OG side, maybe Nautilus would have been a lot better.
Maybe it would have been. OG still managed to pull out the win, and with just 1 week left in the spring split, there is a lot on the line. G2 and H2K are fighting for first. You guys are sharing that spot for now. And Fnatic, UOL, and OG are tied for fourth. And of course, Vitality is right under that top one for you guys, and tied for that race for seventh place, Splice and Elements for now. Let's look at the top of the table. G2 obviously making a big statement in our minds, especially with that win over Vitality yesterday. What do you make of their progression and what they will do in playoffs?
I mean, they've been consistently good. They started off the split off strong. They play really aggressive. They win most of the games. And even now, they keep showing somewhat of a growth. They keep playing better and better. So I think playoffs will be really interesting because I think this team has a lot to show.
Why do you giggle when I bring G2?
No, I wanted to point this out to Odoamne later. Now I feel bad because he starts every segment with I mean, and I was going to tell him later that I had to smile. Anyways, I agree with your point. I know I tilted you for life. What was I going to say? I mean, yeah.
Well,
I had a point here. No. I think the race for 6th place is the most interesting for me because I actually didn't realize that Origen was tied with Fnatic. I felt like watching Origen lose all these games, they were slightly below, and Unicorns, they're just going down. So there's a scenario where Origen somehow still ends up in 4th place, which is a really good seat to be in for playoffs.
Yeah, Unicorns of Love Stress. We were singing their praises so much, and what has happened?
For weeks on end, we're like, best Unicorns, shot calling, it's great, everything looks so good. And now a couple of weeks have gone on, and the luster has started to kind of dull, and the Unicorns right now seem to be a little bit clueless late game. That is their biggest issue right now, is late game decision making twice this week has cost them games. And I mean, it's now kind of this tumbling race for 6th, right? Because Vitality at a minimum a 3rd, and that's not an opponent I want to face in the first round of playoffs. So Unicorns have got to do something to pick that up. Maybe it's the jungler shot calling. We know Lulex's strength previously hasn't really been his impact on teams as an individual player.
And they also lost with Ramos.
I don't think it's the problem of the jungler of what he brings. It's just they play the first 4 or 5 weeks with Diamond Procs, then they bring in Rudy, and then they play 2 weeks with Rudy. They go 3-1, and then they swap him out, bring on Lulex, and it just doesn't seem like they synergize too well because if you don't play that much with a person, you can't really build up team play. So even though you might have a good shot caller, you're just not that great together. Just because you don't have that time to bring it together as a team.
All right. When we look at that other team tied there, Fnatic, obviously coming back from IEM, we were looking a lot at their performances. What's your impression of them back in week 8?
I think they did pretty good this week. I mean, they did have like 17 games in 2 days at IM, so they are pretty much one split ahead of every team in LCS. But I think they did well this week. They won yesterday pretty convincingly. Today they had a really back and forth game, but I think it just came down to individual mistakes, small individual mistakes. They just tilted the game in enemy's favor. So I think that's the reason they lost today. They looked really good. They looked a lot better than the past 7 weeks.
The jitter still in Cly, we gotta say, even after IM.
Yeah, the one problem I have with Cly is like he knows his role, like that Braum game. So he knows his job is to soak up damage, but he plays too far in front of his team. So he really wants to be that guy that like protects his team with the shield, but very often we saw all the hooks come out on him, and Vitality would just chunk him out over and over. Talked a little bit with Kasing about this too. He's like, yeah, like, is that right? You know, is this my suspicion? And I think Clyde needs to play a little farther back and then jump into the team fight once it starts. He got picked out a little bit often, but it's understandable. He went from solo queue straight to the big stage. You have so much pressure on your shoulders, and that's when you start trying to force the play sometimes. But I think there is growth in there, and more importantly, Fnatic seem to get along very well with him, and then excuses a lot of mistakes.
I think it's hard for him since he comes from solo queue coming to a team environment, yeah. And it's hard for him because he plays the Thresh and Janna and the picks that he's comfortable in solo queue pretty well, but when you start playing tanks and you need to understand your role in every fight, where every fight is decided by how you position, he has some slight issues figuring out what he exactly needs to do and when he needs to do. So that's why when he plays Braum, he gets caught with his shield down, he gets caught just one step further from his team, and he he just loses the team fight just before the fight starts, just because he overextended for a tiny bit.
Yep.
I'm glad that you mentioned picks and specific picks with Fnatic, because the question coming into this week was they showed us so many specific picks, the Jhin, the Rammus, the Lee Sin, IM. Would that be enough to put Fnatic in a top 3 contender spot? We learned today no. Vitality let them have the Jhin, they let them have the Lee Sin, and just with very strong picks themselves go, okay, well, we're just going to outplay you on the map. It was a bit of a rough game, but still, it kind of showed that the picks alone aren't enough to get Fnatic in that spot.
Yeah, Rammus was banned. Turns out it wasn't like a cheese champion. I think Rammus right now is like 8-1.
Yeah.
Or going into the last game at least. So turns out it's a pretty broken OP pick.
Yeah, I think it's really strong. It just has so much damage for a tank. He just sits in lane. If it goes to the laning phase, he might fall behind a lot, but it just restricts enemy teams so much. If you decide to pick W8D carry, you're being like, what if they pick Rammus? Then we just lose from that. And it just restricts you so much. It puts a lot of pressure on pick ban, and in game, if he doesn't get punished early game, or if it comes to a lane swap where he just gets free pressure, once he gets like level 9 and 15 minutes in game, he just ignores you, walks past you, just proxies a wave, tanks it, kills it in 2 seconds, then roams to mid, flashes on you, dives you, uses ulti, taunts you. It just...
I see some nightmares from Scrims come up here.
It seems really, and it is really strong. It's just way too strong of a pick.
Ram is way too strong of a pick. I do want to pick your brain as well, because we asked the people at home to send in questions for Ask Odoamne. And at Jankoslol is asking the important question, you mad because I never gank your lane? Odoamne.
Well, I mean, I'm kind of used to it, to not getting ganks, so I just decide to hug my tower and just farm and wait for the other team to just make things happen on the map, and I just sit there and enjoy laning phase and hug my tower in CS, and I just wait for team fight.
Maybe you need to buy some shoes that have light up LEDs in them, because Cabochard gets a lot of camp from his jungler. Are you jealous of Cabochard?
I mean, I'm not jealous. I think he's good. He has a good style, and when he gets help and he gets ahead, he can really roll the game with it. I think he can snowball really hard, but I still need to question when he doesn't get that much help. When he has a pick that is not in his comfort zone and the team needs to play around the mid lane or the bot lane, then I don't
like a Nasus,
like a Nasus. I don't know how consistent he can do and how much impact he can have. But overall, I think he's really good.
Yeah, interesting, because they did go for that Nasus experiment. However, obviously, sometimes you fall behind if you get all the attention. And at Akam4 wants to know, when you get behind from a lane swap, what do you do to stay relevant in the game? You're an expert.
It's pretty hard, because if you get behind in a lane swap, it's a team decision. It's something that your team decided together, and that's why you get behind. But personally, when I get behind in a lane swap, I just try to get roams off. I try to clear vision, get vision, and just try to make my impact as big as I can and try to minimize the enemy laner's impact. Because if I get roams off before him, he needs to match it. If I clear vision, he needs to put vision again. If I put vision, he needs to match it. So I just try to keep myself relevant as much as I can with as little as I have.
Yeah, can you understand some of the top laners won't name names that consistently overpush when they are in that behind position?
I mean, I don't really feel like doing that, but I think so. As kind of overextends a bit without vision.
Baited.
But
Shox was the 6th Siren. They didn't know outsmarted.
Yeah, I just couldn't refuse that question. So.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, we're going to change the topic here for a look at this week's heavy hitters. We're going to check in with Pulse.